The water recycler on level 9 had been leaking for 6 days, and nobody cared enough to fix it. That was the kind of place Kieran 7 was. A rusted trading outpost spinning slowly around a star that was running out of fuel. A place where things broke and stayed broken, including the people who lived there. Ravi Delwin had been on the station for 14 months. He worked the cargo docks on the lower levels, hauling crates for species that never learned his name. He did not mind. He had not come to the edge of the galaxy to be remembered. He had come to forget. Back on Earth, he had been a soldier. A good one, people said. He did not feel good. He felt like a man carrying a weight that had no shape, no edges, and no end. His squad had died on a frozen ridge during a border conflict that barely made the news back home. 7 people who trusted him. 7 people he could not save. So he hauled crates. He ate station food that tasted like recycled air. He slept in a room the size of a closet. And he kept his head down. Humans were nothing special out here. The galaxy had thousands of species, and humans ranked somewhere in the middle of every list. Average strength, average speed, average intelligence. No claws, no venom, no telepathia. Just soft skin and warm blood and a strange habit of refusing to quit. That afternoon, Ravi was stacking fuel cells in Dock 12 when a sound ripped through the market ring above. Shouting, metal crashing, the heavy thud of a body hitting the floor. He climbed the access ladder and pushed through the growing crowd. In the center of the market, near a water stall run by a 3-eyed Palesi merchant, a figure lay crumpled on the ground. She was Tohari. Even collapsed and bleeding, she was terrifying. Nearly 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and dark green scales that looked like polished stone. Her face was sharp, angular, and crossed with deep ritual scars. She wore torn robes that might have once been ceremonial. And clutched in her 2 right hands was a spear. The crowd kept its distance. Every spacefaring species knew about Tohari spears. They were not just weapons. They were alive, grown from the bones of Tohari ancestors and bonded to a single warrior through a neural link that began at birth. The spear felt what the warrior felt. It moved when the warrior thought. And if anyone else touched it, the spear killed them. Instantly. A burst of neural energy that stopped the heart cold. The Tohari woman was starving. Ravi could see it in the way her scales had gone dull, the way her breathing came in shallow rasps. She had been running from something for a long time, and she had finally run out of road. Nobody moved. Nobody helped. Ravi felt something old and familiar stir in his chest. The same feeling he had carried on that frozen ridge. The feeling that said someone was dying and he was just standing there. His friend Lita appeared beside him. She was the station's only human medic, a sharp woman with short gray hair and no patience for stupidity. She grabbed his arm. "Do not," she said. "She is dying, and that spear will kill anyone who gets close. You know what those things do." He didn't know. Everyone knew. But he also knew what it looked like when someone had given up, when the body was still breathing, but the soul had already started to leave. He had seen it 7 times on a frozen ridge. He pulled his arm free and walked forward. The crowd went quiet. A Palesi merchant hissed a warning. A Dressari trader covered his eyes with both flippers, as if watching a man walk into a fire. Ravi knelt beside the Tohari woman. Up close, he could see the wounds under her torn robes. Old cuts, infected burns. She had been tortured before she ran. Her eyes were closed. Her 4 hands had gone limp, and the spear had rolled slightly away from her body, resting on the cold metal floor of the market. He did not think about what he was doing. He did not calculate the risk or weigh his options. He simply reached down to move the spear out of the walkway so nobody would trip over it and panic. His fingers closed around the dark shaft. The market went dead silent. Every alien in the crowd stopped breathing. The spear did not kill him. Instead, it shook. A single, deep vibration that traveled up through his hand, into his arm, and settled somewhere behind his ribs. It was not painful. It was not violent. It felt like a heartbeat that was not his own. Like something ancient and alive had just opened its eyes and seen him for the first time. The spear hummed, a low, resonant tone that filled the market ring and made the metal floor plates buzz under everyone's feet. It was a sound no one on Kieran 7 had ever heard. a sound that had not been heard anywhere in the galaxy for 5,000 years. The Tohari woman's eyes snapped open. They were gold, bright, and burning, and they locked onto Ravi with an intensity that made his blood go cold. She stared at him, at his hand on her spear, at the impossible thing that was happening right in front of her. She spoke one word in broken common, her voice raw and cracked. Ow! Ravi looked at the humming spear in his hand. He looked at the dying warrior on the ground. He looked at the crowd of aliens frozen in shock around him. He had no answer. He had only the truth. I just did not want anyone to trip on it, he said. The spear kept humming. Nobody on Kirin 7 slept well that night. Word traveled fast on a station where gossip was the only free currency. By the time the lights dimmed for the artificial night cycle, every trader, smuggler, and dock worker had heard the same impossible story. A human touched a Tohari spear and lived. Ravi did not care about the gossip. He cared about the woman bleeding on Lita's examination table in the cramped medical bay on level 4. He had carried her there himself, all 7 feet and 4 arms of her, while the crowd stood frozen and watched. Lita worked quickly. She cleaned the infected wounds, applied nutrient patches to the worst of the malnutrition damage, and muttered curses at whoever had done this to her. The Tohari woman drifted in and out of consciousness for hours. The spear rested on the floor beside the table, silent now, but still warm to the touch. It was close to midnight when the warrior finally woke up fully. She sat up slowly, her gold eyes scanning the room with the sharp awareness of someone who had spent a long time expecting ambush. She saw Lita first, then she saw Ravi, sitting on a crate in the corner with his arms folded. She stared at him for a long time. "What are you?" she asked. Her common was rough, broken in places, but clear enough. "Human," Ravi said. She shook her head slowly. "No, humans are soft, unremarkable. My people have studied your kind. You have no gifts." Lita snorted from across the room. "He sure has a gift for walking into danger like an idiot." The warrior ignored her. She pointed at the spear on the floor. "That is Irith. She was grown from the bones of my grandmother's grandmother. She was bonded to me the day I was born. For 32 years, she has known only my soul." She paused. In 5,000 years of Tohari history, no unbonded being has ever touched a living spear and survived. The neural shock stops the heart before the brain even knows what happened. Ravi looked at the spear. "It did not shock me. It just shook. It did not just shake." The warrior's voice dropped low. It sang. "That sound, the hum you heard, my people call it the voice of resonance. It is a myth, a story told to children before sleep. It means the spear has recognized a second soul as worthy." Worthy of what? She looked at him like he had asked why water was wet. Worthy of everything. Ravi rubbed his face. He was tired. He had been hauling cargo since dawn, carried a 7-foot warrior through a crowded station, and now he was apparently part of an alien fairy tale. "I think you are reading too much into it. I just picked it up." The warrior stood. Even weak and wounded, she towered over him. Her 4 arms hung at her sides, the 2 upper ones crossed, the 2 lower ones loose. "My name is Sana. I was a warrior priestess of the 3rd Order. I was trained by Brother OSS himself, the highest voice of our faith." She paused. Something dark passed over her scarred face. "I was exiled 2 years ago." "Why?" Lita asked. Sana turned to her. "During the border campaign against the Fenari, my order captured 200 civilians. Brother OSS commanded me to execute them as a message. Women, children, elderly who could not even stand." Her jaw tightened. "I refused." The room was quiet. "They branded me a coward, a blasphemer against the spear's purpose. They scarred my face with the marks of shame, stripped my rank, and cast me out." She touched the ritual scars on her cheeks. "I have been running since, station to station, eating scraps, hiding from hunters sent to finish what the exile started." Ravi said nothing for a while. Then he asked a simple question. "Are you safe here?" Sana almost smiled. "Almost. Nowhere is safe for me." Before anyone could respond, the medical bay door slid open. A small, round figure waddled in, his wet amphibian skin glistening under the harsh lights. "Gallo Fun," the Dressari merchant who ran Kirin 7 through debt and manipulation. He had a wide mouth that always seemed to be smiling, even when he was cutting your wages or selling your belongings to cover fees you never agreed to. "My dear friends," Gallo said, spreading his flippers wide, "what an extraordinary evening. I have heard the most fascinating rumor about our humble cargo worker and a certain Tohari artifact." "It is not an artifact," Sun Na said coldly. "She is alive." Gallo waved a flipper dismissively. Of course. Living weapon, sacred bond, ancient tradition, all very impressive." He turned his bulging eyes to Ravi. "But the point, my friend, is that word is already spreading beyond this station. A human who can touch a Tohari spear without dying? That is not just a miracle. That is a commodity." Ravi felt something tighten in his chest. "I am not a commodity." "Everything is a commodity on Kirin 7, Gallo said cheerfully. "The question is simply who sets the price." He looked between Ravi and Sana, his wide mouth stretching even wider. "I have already received 3 inquiries from off-station buyers. By tomorrow, there will be 30. This station is about to become very, very popular." He turned and waddled back toward the door. Just before he left, he looked over his shoulder. "I would rest while you can," he said. "Both of you. Things are going to move quickly now." The door closed behind him. The medical bay was quiet again. Sana looked at Ravi. "He will sell us both if he can." "I know," Ravi said. "You are not afraid?" He thought about that. He thought about the frozen ridge, about the 7 names he carried, about the sound the spear had made when he touched it, that strange, warm hum that felt like something between grief and hope. "I have been afraid before," he said. It did not help. On the floor beside them, Irith hummed softly in the dark. 3 days after the incident in the market, Kirin 7 had more ships docked at its ports than it had seen in 5 years combined. They came from every corner of the outer spiral. Merchants, scholars, weapons dealers, bounty hunters, and representatives from species Ravi had never even heard of. All of them drawn by the same impossible rumor. Gallo was thriving. The Dressari merchant had doubled the docking fees overnight and tripled the cost of food and water. He walked the station's corridors with the satisfied waddle of someone who had found gold in a garbage heap. Ravi tried to keep his routine. He showed up at the docks. He hauled crates. He kept his head down, but the stares followed him everywhere. Aliens who had ignored him for over a year now watched him from doorways and corridors, some with curiosity, some with hunger. On the second day, a delegation of Venery slavers cornered him in the cargo bay. They were tall, thin beings with silver skin and no visible eyes, navigating by vibration and heat. Their leader spoke in a voice that sounded like silk being torn. "We represent the Venery Biological Research Consortium. We are prepared to offer you more wealth than your species has generated in its entire history. All we require is your cooperation in a series of neural studies." "No," Ravi said. "You have not heard our offer. I do not need to. I am not a lab subject." The Venery tilted its featureless head. "Everything has a price, human. Not everything." Ravi picked up a cargo crate and walked past them. They did not follow, but he could feel their eyeless attention on his back like cold fingers. Sana watched all of this. She had recovered enough strength to move around the station, though she stayed close to the lower levels where Ravi and Lita spent most of their time. She wore a hooded cloak to hide her scars and kept Irith strapped to her back beneath the fabric. She watched Ravi work. She watched him interact with the other laborers on the docks. She noticed things. He remembered names. Not just the names of humans or the more common species, but the names of the small, quiet ones. The insectoid cleaners who scrubbed the ventilation shafts. The fungal beings who maintained the water recyclers. The old Palesi dock worker with the cracked shell who everyone else pretended did not exist. Ravi knew them all. He asked about their families. He shared his food rations when they ran short. He sat with them during breaks and listened to stories told in languages he could barely understand, nodding along with patience that seemed to have no bottom. One evening, Sana found him on level 2, sitting beside a dying Kalori worker. The Kalori were small insectoid beings with translucent wings and fragile bodies. This one was old, its wings cracked and gray, its compound eyes clouding over. It had no family on the station, no friends. It was going to die alone in a maintenance corridor that smelled like engine coolant. Except it was not going to die alone, because Ravi was there. He sat on the cold floor with his back against the wall, one hand resting gently on the Kalori's thin arm. He was not speaking. He was just present, breathing, being there. The Kalori made a series of soft clicking sounds. Ravi did not understand the language, but he nodded anyway. He stayed. He stayed for 3 hours, until the clicking stopped and the old worker's wings went still. Then he sat there for another 10 minutes, just in case. Sana stood in the shadows of the corridor and watched. Something shifted inside her chest, in the place where her bond with Irith lived. She had spent her whole life among warriors. She had been trained to believe that strength was the ability to destroy, to dominate, to endure. But this human did not fight anything. He did not conquer anything. He simply refused to let another living being suffer alone. And that, she realized, was why the spear had sung. Tohari spears were not just weapons. They were judges. They read the soul of whoever touched them and measured what they found against the oldest definition of worth that the Tohari had ever known. Not strength, not power, not skill, but the willingness to carry a burden that was not yours. To feel pain that did not belong to you. To stay when everything reasonable said to leave. Humans called it empathy. The Tohari had a word for it too, but they had forgotten it centuries ago when the warrior caste took control and turned the spears into instruments of conquest instead of guardians of compassion. Ravi had reminded the spear of what it was supposed to be looking for all along. She found him later in the small common area on level 4, eating a plate of tasteless station rations. She sat across from him. Irith hummed faintly against her back. "The Kalori worker," she said. "You sat with it until it died." "Him," Ravi corrected gently. His name was Chick. He worked recycler maintenance for 11 years. Sinha stared at him. "You knew his name. Everyone has a name." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something she had never said to anyone since her exile. "I think I understand now. Why Irith chose you." Before Ravi could respond, Lita burst through the door. Her face was pale, and she was out of breath. She had been running. "A Tohari warship just dropped out of hyperspace," she said. "It is heading straight for the station. They are broadcasting on all channels." She looked at Sana. "They're demanding the station hand you over. Both of you." Sena's 4 hands clenched. Her gold eyes went hard. "Brother OSS," she whispered. Outside the station, the dying star flickered, and something old and terrible moved closer. The broadcast came through every speaker on Kirin 7. A deep, rumbling voice speaking perfect common with the weight of absolute authority behind every word. "This is Brother OSS, High Priest of the Tohari First Covenant. You are harboring an exile convicted of blasphemy against the sacred bond. You are also harboring a human who has committed the crime of touching a living spear. Surrender both to my custody within 6 hours. Failure to comply will result in the depressurization of your station. This is not a negotiation." The message repeated 3 times. Then silence. Panic moved through Kirin 7 like poison in water. Traders began packing their ships. Dock workers abandoned their posts. Gallofin locked himself in his office on level 1 and began sending frantic communications to every authority he could think of, though out here on the edge of nothing, authority was just a word. Lita moved fast. She led Ravi and Sana down through the maintenance access points on level 6, past the broken water recyclers and dead ventilation units, into the old reactor tunnels that ran beneath the station's core. Nobody came down here. The tunnels were cold, dark, and smelled like burnt metal, but they were off every scanner on the station. They sat in the near darkness, surrounded by pipes that had not carried power in years. Lita activated a small portable lamp that threw orange light across the walls. 6 hours, Lita said. "That is what we have." Sana sat with her back against the wall, Irith across her knees. The spear was silent. Even it seemed to understand the gravity of what was coming. "Brother OSS does not bluff," she said quietly. "He will open the station to space. He has done it before. On a colony near the Fenari border, he depressurized an entire habitat ring to kill 3 deserters. 2,000 civilians died, and nobody stopped him? Ravi asked. Nobody stops the Tohari, Sana said. Not out here. Not anywhere. Ravi leaned his head back against the cold pipe behind him. He closed his eyes. Tell me about him. Sana was quiet for a moment. He was my teacher. Before the exile, before everything, he trained me from the time I was a child. He taught me to fight, to pray, to listen to Iritha's voice inside my mind. She paused. He was different then. Or maybe I was too young to see what he really was. When the war with the Fenari started, something changed. The killing became the point. Not defense, not protection, just blood. He said the spears demanded it. That the ancestors were hungry. Were they? Lita asked. Sana looked down at Irith. The spears are alive. They feel, but they do not hunger for blood. That was always a lie the warrior caste told to justify what they wanted to do anyway. She traced a finger along the dark shaft. Irith never wanted me to kill those prisoners. I felt it. She was screaming inside my head to stop. That is why I refused the order. That is the real blasphemy Brother OSS cannot forgive. Not that I disobeyed him. That the spear agreed with me. The tunnel was quiet except for the distant groaning of the station's old bones. Ravi opened his eyes. What does he want? Really? Control, Sunna said. If the resonance is real, if a human can truly touch a bonded spear and survive, it means the old doctrine is wrong. It means the spears are not exclusive to the Tohari. It means the warrior caste has been lying to our people for centuries about what the spears truly are and what they truly want. Brother OSS cannot allow that truth to exist. So he will kill us to bury it, Ravi said. He will kill everyone on this station to bury it. Lita rubbed her temples. Great. Wonderful. Any plans from the man who likes to pet alien weapons? Ravi looked at Sana. What do you want? The question seemed to catch her off guard. In 2 years of running, hiding, and starving, nobody had asked her what she wanted. People had told her what she was. Criminal, blasphemer, exile. But nobody had asked what she actually wanted. She took a long time to answer. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I want the spear to mean what it was supposed to mean. Not death, not obedience, not war. I want it to mean what it meant before the warrior caste corrupted everything. She looked at Irith. Purpose, connection, the willingness to protect instead of destroy. Ravi nodded slowly. He stood up and brushed the dust from his work clothes. Where are you going? Lita asked sharply. Up. Up where? To talk to Brother OSS. Lita stared at him. Sinha stared at him. Even in the dim orange light, he could see the disbelief on both their faces. You cannot reason with him, Sinha said. He is a high priest. He has killed thousands. He does not talk. He commands. Then he can command me to my face, Ravi said. He looked at Sinha. Stay here. Stay hidden. If this goes wrong, Lita knows where the emergency pods are on level 3. And if it goes right? Sinha asked. Ravi almost smiled. I have never been that lucky. But there is always a first time. He walked to the tunnel entrance. Lita grabbed his arm one more time, just like she had in the market 3 days ago. You're going to die, she said. Maybe, he said, but I would rather die walking towards something than hiding from it. He pulled his arm free, gently, and climbed up into the light. Behind him, in the dark, Irith began to hum. Ravi walked into the central atrium of Kiran, 7 with nothing in his hands and nothing on his mind except one simple idea. Tell the truth and see what happens. The atrium was the largest open space on the station. A circular chamber 3 levels high with balconies ringing the upper tiers. On any normal day, it served as a gathering point for traders and travelers. Today, it looked like an arena. Brother OSS stood at the center. He was the largest Tohari Ravi had ever seen, and Ravi had carried Sana, so that was saying something. Nearly 8 feet tall, for arms thick with corded muscle. His scales were almost black, scarred from decades of ritual combat. His eyes were deep gold, darker than Sena's, and they held the absolute certainty of a being who had never once questioned whether he was right. 6 Tohari warriors flanked him in a half circle. Each one carried a bonded spear. The weapons hummed at different pitches, creating a low chord that made the floor vibrate and the air taste like metal. Behind the warriors, on every balcony and in every corridor opening, the residents of Kirin, 7 watched. Hundreds of aliens of dozens of species, packed together in terrified silence. Gallofin stood on the second-tier balcony, his wet amphibian face unreadable. Lita was somewhere in the crowd. Ravi could not see her, but he knew she was there. Brother OSS saw him approaching and tilted his massive head. His 4 arms were folded across his chest in a posture of judgment. "You are the human," OSS said. His comment was perfect. His voice filled the atrium without effort. "I am," Ravi said. "You are small." "I am." OSS unfolded his upper arms and gestured at the atrium. "Do you understand what is happening here? My exile has allowed a living spear to be defiled by alien hands. The resonance is a myth, a corruption of our scripture twisted by heretics and fools. Your survival was a malfunction. Nothing more." "Then test it," Ravi said. The words landed in the silence like a stone in still water. Every alien in the atrium stiffened. OSS's warriors shifted their weight. Even the humming of their spears seemed to pause. OSS narrowed his gold eyes. "What did you say?" Ravi kept his voice steady. He was terrified. His hands were shaking, and he pushed them into his pockets so nobody would see. But his voice held. "Your own scriptures say the spears are alive. They choose. They judge. That is the foundation of your entire faith. So let one judge me. Right here, in front of everyone." He took a step forward. "If I am a fraud, the spear will kill me the moment I touch it. My heart will stop. Problem solved. Your doctrine is confirmed, and you can take Sanna and do whatever you want." Another step. "But if I am not a fraud, if the spear sings again, then your exile told the truth. The resonance is real, and everything you have built your power on is a lie." OSS did not move. His gold eyes burned with a fury that had weight to it, a physical pressure that made the air around him feel heavier. But Ravi saw something else behind the fury, something small and desperate. Fear. "You dare challenge the high priest of the First Covenant." "Oskruvlid." "I'm not challenging you," Ravi said. "I'm challenging the spear, unless you do not trust your own weapon to tell the truth." The atrium held its breath. On the balconies, hundreds of aliens watched the small human standing alone in front of the most dangerous warrior priest in the galaxy. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. OSS could not refuse. Ravi saw it in his face, in the rigid set of his jaw, and the tension in his 4 clenched fists. If he refused the test, he was admitting that he feared the result. His warriors would see it. The entire station would see it. His authority rested on the absolute supremacy of the spears, and if he would not let his own spear judge a soft, unarmed human, then that supremacy meant nothing. OSS reached behind his back and drew his spear. It was enormous, longer and thicker than Senna's Irith, with a shaft so dark it seemed to swallow light. This was Gorath, one of the oldest living spears in existence, bonded to the OSS bloodline for over 1,000 years. He drove it into the floor between them. The metal plating cracked under the impact. Gorath vibrated with a deep, threatening tone. "Touch it," OSS snarled. "And die." Ravi looked at the spear. He thought about the frozen ridge and the 7 names he had carried across the stars. He thought about Chick, the old Kalori worker who died with Ravi's hand on his arm. He thought about Sunna, hiding in the dark below, wanting her spear to mean something other than death. He reached out and wrapped his fingers around Gorath. The spear screamed. Not a hum, not a song, a scream that tore through the atrium like a living thing. Every window on the upper tiers cracked. Aliens on the balconies dropped to their knees, covering their ears. The 6 Tohari warriors staggered as their own spears shrieked in answer. Gorath shook so violently that the floor plating buckled and split beneath it. Ravi held on. His hand burned. His vision blurred. But he held on. And through the neural link, through the ancient bond that connected Gorath to brother OSS, something impossible happened. OSS felt what Ravi felt. Not strength, not rage, not the desire to conquer or dominate. He felt grief so deep it had no floor. He felt the desperate need to sit with a dying stranger and hold their hand. He felt what it was like to see every living being around you and care about all of them, not as a duty, not as a doctrine, but as a reflex. The scream faded. Gorith went still. Ravi released the shaft and stumbled backward. His hand was burned red, trembling. Blood dripped from his nose. Brother OSS stood frozen. His gold eyes were wide. His 4 arms hung limp at his sides. And down his scarred, ancient face, tears fell. Tears he had not shed in decades. Tears he did not know he still had. His warriors had lowered their spears. The atrium was silent. Then, from the tunnel entrance on the far side of the chamber, Sanaa walked out. Irith glowed faintly in her hands, humming a note that matched the dying echo of Gorith's scream. She crossed the atrium floor, step by step, and came to stand beside Ravi. Nobody stopped her. Nobody spoke. She stood beside the bleeding, shaking human, and faced her former master. And for the first time, Brother OSS had no words. For a long time, nobody in the atrium moved. The silence was not the kind born from fear. It was the kind that follows a truth so large that the world needs a moment to make room for it. Brother OSS stood in the center of the chamber with tears drying on his scarred face. His warriors watched him. The station watched him. He had spent his entire life being the voice that others obeyed without question, and now that voice had nothing to say. Sanaa spoke first. She did not speak as a criminal addressing a judge. She did not beg or bow. She spoke as a student to a teacher, with the respect she still carried for the being who had shaped her, even after everything he had done. You felt it, she said, through Gorith. You felt what he feels. OSS did not deny it. He could not. The neural link between a priest and his spear was absolute. What Gorith showed him was not a trick. It was not a corruption. It was the unfiltered interior of a human soul, and it had broken something inside him that he had spent decades building. He has no armor, Sanaa continued. No venom, no clothes, no telepathy, no exoskeleton. He is soft and breakable, and he walked up to the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy and touched it with his bare hands. She paused, not to fight, not to prove himself. He touched Irith because he saw someone dying on the ground and wanted to help. He touched Gorith because he believed the truth was worth more than his own life. She let those words settle. That is what the spears were made to recognize. Not killers, not conquerors, souls willing to carry a weight that does not belong to them. That is what the resonance is. It always was. We just forgot. OSS looked at his own hands. For massive, scarred hands that had held Gorith for 60 years. Hands that had given orders that killed thousands. He looked at Ravi, who stood beside Sanaa, pale and shaking, blood still dripping from his nose, his burned hand cradled against his chest. A small, soft, unremarkable being from a planet that the galaxy barely noticed. And Gorith, the 1,000-year-old weapon of the OSS bloodline, had screamed for him, not in warning, not in rage, in recognition. OSS lowered himself, not to one knee, both. The full prostration of a Tohari priest before a truth he could not deny. He did not kneel to Ravi. He did not kneel to Sanaa. He knelt to Gorith. He pressed his forehead against the spear's shaft where it still stood embedded in the cracked floor, and he whispered a prayer. It was an old prayer, older than the warrior caste, older than the priesthood. It came from a time before the Tohari turned their living weapons into tools of conquest. A prayer of asking, not commanding. A prayer that said, "Show me what I have forgotten." Gorith hummed, low and warm, like a heart remembering how to beat. Astute. He was still massive, still scarred, still terrifying, but something behind his gold eyes had changed. The certainty was gone. In its place was something raw and fragile, something that looked almost like the beginning of understanding. He turned to his warriors. "The exile is void," he said. His voice was rough. "Sanaa the Third Order is no blasphemer. The resonance is real. It was witnessed by my own spear through my own bond." The warriors shifted. Some looked relieved. Some looked afraid. One, the youngest, looked at Ravi with something close to wonder. OSS turned back to Sana. I will return to the home world and present this truth to the High Council. I do not know what they will do. The old order will not fall quietly. There will be those who call me a traitor, just as they called you. Sana nodded. I know. I may not survive it. I know that too. OSS looked at Ravi one last time. The human met his gaze. He did not flinch. He did not look away. He just stood there, small and bleeding and steady. Your kind has a strange strength, OSS said quietly. It is not in your bodies. It is not in your weapons. It is in the way you refuse to stop caring, even when it costs you everything. Ravi had no grand answer. We're just built that way, he said. OSS almost smiled. Almost. Then he turned, pulled Gorth from the floor, and walked toward the docking ring. His warriors followed. The crowd parted for them in silence. Within the hour, the Tohari warship was gone. Its engines flared blue against the dying star, and then it vanished into hyperspace, carrying a truth that would shake a civilization. Gallo Fun, seeing no more profit to extract from the situation, retreated to his office and began calculating his next scheme. The station slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Ships departed. Workers returned to their posts. The water recycler on level 9 kept leaking. Lita found Ravi in the medical bay and spent 20 minutes treating his burned hand while calling him the dumbest person in 3-star systems. He let her. She had earned it. That evening, Ravi sat on the observation deck on level 2. It was a small room with a single viewport that looked out at the old star. The light was dim and red, the slow glow of something reaching its end. He sat on the floor with his back against the wall, his bandaged hand resting on his knee. Sana found him there. She sat down beside him without asking. Irith lay across her knees. The spear hummed softly, the same warm tone it had made the first time Ravi touched it, steady and alive. They sat in silence for a while. It still hums when you are near, Sana said. Ravi looked at the spear. He looked at her. Her gold eyes were calm. The scars on her face no longer looked like marks of shame. They looked like proof that she had survived something worth surviving. Maybe it just likes the company, he said. Sana leaned back against the wall. Irith hummed between them. Outside, the dying star burned its slow, red light. And far away, on the Tohari homeworld, something stirred. In the great temple where 1,000 bonded spears rested in their cradles, waiting in silence, as they had for centuries, a sound began. One spear hummed, then another, then 10, then 100, then all of them, 1,000 living weapons singing together for the first time in 5,000 years. A chord so deep it shook the stone floors and cracked the temple windows and brought the priests to their knees. They did not know what it meant. Not yet, but the spears knew. Somewhere across the galaxy, on a rusted station orbiting a dying star, a human with a burned hand and a quiet heart had reminded them what they were for. And they were singing because they remembered.